Hello, this is day 59 of reading one canto of the Divine Comedy every single day. We are on Purgatorio, Canto 25, which I will read from the Longfellow translation before giving some quick comments. Now was it the ascent no hindrance brooked, because the sun had his meridian circle to Taurus left, and night to Scorpio. Wherefore, as doth a man who tarries not, but goes his way, whatever to him appear, if of necessity the sting transfix him, in this wise did we enter through the gap, taking the stairway one before the other, which by its narrowness divides the climbers. And as the little stork that lifts its wing with a desire to fly, and does not venture to leave the nest, and lets its downward droop, even such was I, with the desire of asking, kindled and quenched, unto the motion coming he makes who doth address himself to speak. Not for our pace, though rapid it might be, my father sweet forbore, but said, Let fly the bow of speech, thou to the barb hast drawn. With confidence I opened then my mouth, and I began, How can one meagre grow there where the need of nutriment applies not? If thou wouldst call to mind how Meleager was wasted by the wasting of a brand, this would not, said he, be to thee so sour. And wouldst thou think how at each tremulous motion trembles within a mirror of your own image, that which seems hard would mellow seem to thee. But that thou mayst content thee in thy wish, lo, Statius here, and him I call, and pray he now will be the healer of thy wounds. If I unfold to him the eternal vengeance, responded Statius, where thou present art, be my excuse that I cannot deny thee. Then he began, Son, if these words of mine thy mind doth contemplate and doth receive, they'll be thy light unto the how thou sayest. The perfect blood, which never is drunk up into the thirsty veins, and which remaineth like food that from the table thou removest, takes in the heart, for all the human members, virtue informative, as being that which is to be changed to them goes through the veins again digest, descends it where 'tis better silent to be than say, and then drops thence upon another's blood in natural vase. There one together with the other mingles, one to be passive meant, the other active by reason of the perfect place it springs from, and, being conjoined, begins to operate, coagulating first, then vivifying what for its matter it had made consistent. The active virtue being made a soul as of a plant, in so far different, this on the way is that arrived already, then works so much that now it moves and feels like a sea fungus, and then undertakes to organize the powers whose seed it is. Now, son, dilates and now distends itself the virtue from the generator's heart, where nature is intent on all the members. But how from animal it man becomes thou dost not see as yet. This is a point which made a wiser man than thou once err so far, that in his doctrine separate he made the soul from possible intellect, for he no organ saw by this assumed. Open thy breast unto the truth that's coming, and know that just as soon as in the fetus the articulation of the brain is perfect, the primal motor turns to it well pleased at so great art of nature, and inspires a spirit new with virtue all replete, which, what it finds there active, doth attract into its substance, and becomes one soul, which lives and feels, and on itself revolves. And that thou less may wonder at my word, behold the sun's heat, which becometh wine, joined to the juice that from the vine distills. Whenever Lachesis has no more thread, it separates from the flesh, and virtually bears with itself the human and divine. The other faculties are voiceless all. The memory, the intelligence, and the will in action, far more vigorous than before. Without a pause, it falleth of itself in marvelous way on one shore or the other. There of its roads it first is cognizant. Soon as the place there circumscribeth it, the virtue informative rays round about, and as much as in the living members. And even as the air, when full of rain, by alien rays that are therein reflected, with diverse colours shows itself adorned, so there the neighbouring air doth shape itself into that form which doth impress upon it virtually the soul that has stood still. And then in manner of the little flame which followeth the fire wherever it shifts, after the spirit followeth its new form. Since afterwards it takes from this its semblance, it is called shade, and thence it organizes thereafter every sense, even to the sight. Thence is it that we speak, and thence we laugh, Thence is it that we form the tears and sighs that on the mountain thou mayhap hast heard. According as impress us our desires and other affections, so the shade is shaped, and this is cause of what thou wonderest at. And now, unto the last of all the circles had we arrived, and to the right hand turned, and were attentive to another care. There the embankment shoots forth flames of fire, and upward doth the cornice breathe a blast that drives them back, and from itself sequesters. Hence we must needs go on the open side, and one by one, and I did fear the fire on this side, and on that the falling down. My leader said, Along this place one ought to keep upon the eyes a tightened rein, seeing that one so easily might err. Sume Deus clementiae. In the bosom of the great burning chanted then I heard, which made me no less eager to turn round. And spirits saw I walking through the flame, wherefore I looked, to my own steps and theirs, apportioning my sight from time to time. After the close, which to that hymn is made, aloud they shouted, Virum non cognosco. Then recommenced the hymn with voices low. This also ended, cried they, To the wood Diana ran, and drove forth Hellas therefrom, who had of Venus felt the poison. Then to their song returned they. Then the wives they shouted, and the husbands who were chase, as virtue and the marriage vow imposes. And I believe that them this mode suffices, for all the time the fire is burning them. With such care is it needful, and such food, that the last wound of all should be closed up. Quote from the beginning here that kind of brings together the theme. The shade takes on the form of our desire. It changes with the feelings we may have. That, in a sense, is what this canto is about. Dante asks a very similar question to the one he had a couple cantos ago, where he asked, well, why do these souls, who have no need for food, look so skinny? He basically asked the same thing again, and both Virgil and Statius answer him. And the answer is basically, well, physicality, your spirit and your body are linked. They're all linked together. You are not one without the other. Barolini points out that this is something that's common throughout the Inferno and the Purgatorio. Dante always brings us back to the idea, the actually accurate Catholic doctrine that body and soul are not to be separated. The human is a union of both. There's no dualism where the one can't possibly affect the other, or the one doesn't matter and the other does. No, instead, they are intertwined such that they affect each other very strongly. On the one hand, the actions we take with our body affects the condition of our soul, and on the other one, seen here in the Purgatorio, the condition of the soul affects the appearance of the physical body of these shades. And Statius also goes into a long, drawn-out description of the process of procreation, actually. Not as we would understand it today, but definitely from... It should be noted that while Dante's description here of the process of procreation and of fetal development as he understood it then kind of follows what Aquinas was saying at the time, which is that the quickening, the moment that the soul enters the human body, happens at some point along the way during development. Modern Catholic doctrine would even, informed by science, actually agree even more with the point that Dante is trying to make about body-soul union, in that it says that the human is, at the moment of its conception, at the moment it is a single cell, the soul is already there. All that to say, Dante is very consistent in his portrayal of this body-soul unity principle. And that is why the souls of the gluttonous appear to be starving, even though they're souls. Lastly, we finally enter the terrace of the lustful, which is the topmost terrace of purgatory. We're almost at the end. And we see them all the lustful souls, standing in fire. The contrapasso here is obvious. The fire of passion, of desire, is very much symbolized in the fire that these souls have to stand in for however much time to be purged of the sins that they had committed. Mary, of course, is cited as an example of the virtue of chastity, and classically, Dante points to the goddess Diana, who was chaste as a huntress. And lastly, when Dante is describing where these souls are, he says this is the place where the last of all their wounds is healed. which reminds us this is a healing medicinal process. And furthermore, this is the last terrace of purgatory, that we are at the top. Once these souls get through this fire, they're off to heaven. The existence of purgatory is an act of mercy that enables those who are not perfect to become so, to become worthy of heaven. That's all for today, though. I'll see you tomorrow.